Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Chelmsford Business Association Annual Candidates Night. We have a great program set up for this evening, and I want to thank all of you for coming, as well as you watching at home. I would like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Mr. Doug Hauser.
Good evening, candidates, and welcome to the Annual Candidates Night, sponsored by the Chelmsford Business Association. We are broadcasting live this evening from the Radisson Hotel in Chelmsford at 10 Independence Drive. First, the Business Association wants to thank the Chelmsford Telemedia for all of its efforts to make this production possible. And we want to thank our guests, especially the candidates, as well as any press that may show up, and our viewers at home, both present and at home, for participating in our program. Tonight, we will have 3 candidates seeking election to the 2 available positions on the Board of Selectmen. Each candidate has provided us with a short biographical introduction that I will read, and after reading these introductions, we will begin asking the candidates questions. Each candidate, as we've historically have done, they will have up to 1 minute to respond to each question. The candidates will be asked questions that were prepared in advance by the Candidate Night Committee, as well as questions from opponents that they will give to each other and the press if the press arrives. Questions that were sent in advance to the committee or that are submitted tonight from the audience might also be used, but those questions will be reviewed in advance by the Committee for Candidates Night to make sure that they are appropriate. For those in the room, if they wish to have a question presented, please write it out on the paper that's on the tables and deliver it to the front timetable, and we'll review it. And if we have opportunity, we'll try to get those questions to be part of the program. And at the end of tonight's program, each candidate was going to be allowed to make a closing statement that is not to exceed 1 minute. As moderator, the Candidates Night Committee allows me to interrupt a candidate if the answer by that candidate is construed as non-responsive, or perhaps, in my opinion, it needs some clarification. We ask the audience to be refrain from making much table conversation during the program because we don't wish to distract our candidates, and we want them to have the opportunity to let his or her position be well known without being distracted. We also ask that the audience present tonight here would withhold any applause until all of the candidates for selectmen have finished their closing statements. So now let's begin with the introduction of our candidate selectmen. Pat Wojcik is a candidate for re-election to the Board of Selectmen. She grew up in Chelmsford and graduated from Chelmsford High School with the class of 1970. Upon graduation from UMass Amherst, where she participated in the ROTC program, she served in the United States Air Force and later in the Air National Guard. While stationed in Oklahoma, she earned a master's degree in business administration at the University of Central Oklahoma. Pat has served on many committees, including the Military Community Covenant, which she helped launch in 2009. She is currently chair of the Northern Middlesex Council of Governments, NEMCOG. Pat states that she continues to be active in town organizations, and for example, she's recently just stepped down as president of the Chelmsford Friends of the Library. And she also says that she will be bringing her experience and knowledge to the board, and she's looking forward to serving the residents of Chelmsford for another term as a selectman if elected. Our second candidate is Virginia Crocker Timmons. She has called Chelmsford home for 22 years. She has a master's degree in electrical engineering from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. After a corporate defense industry career, Virginia founded Soundboard Advisors, LLC, which leads individuals and organizations to maximize their potential through business and executive coaching. She states that she has the experience and she has applied her leadership and critical thinking skills to guide companies and nonprofit organizations through complex and dynamic situations, and that will help Chelmsford address the challenges of its future if elected. Virginia is a volunteer participant on the Route 40 Study Committee, and she believes that This has given her a unique opportunity to understand the needs of neighborhoods and the Chelmsford community as a whole. She states that she's committed to increasing outreach and transparency in government. And her goals are to make sure people understand the impacts to individual residents and the entire community in an inclusive manner to establish vision, find balance, and achieve better qualities of life. Our third candidate is Glenn Cole. Glenn is a lifelong resident of Chelmsford, as is his wife, Carla. He and Carla have 2 adult children who graduated from the Chelmsford Public School system. Glenn has been self-employed as a farmer, real estate developer, and is the owner and operator of a heavy construction company. Glenn has served in a variety of elected and appointed positions in Chelmsford. As an elected planning board member for 4.5 years, and as an alternate member elected for 1.5 years. Glenn has been the clerk of the planning board, and he is a 9-year member of the Agricultural Commission, which was appointed, to which he was appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And he has also been appointed by the Board of Selectmen to the Grinder Pump Committee. And Glenn identified that his 2 reasons for running for selectman are trying to control municipal spending habits and operating costs that need to be more closely examined before being submitted to town meeting. He believes that the public safety budgets are currently well managed, but that other town departments could benefit from cost-saving measures. And his second reason for running was to make the selectmen to be more active when reviewing large-scale development projects and to make sure that they do not negatively impact neighborhoods. So that's our introduction of the 3 candidates, and now we'll go to questions. Our first question is as follows. The Route 40 rezoning proposal is a controversial subject in Chelmsford. What are your thoughts on the proposal? Are you in favor of the rezoning? Have you discussed the issue with any of the residents in the Route 40 area or attended any of the study commission meetings? And we're going to start with Virginia to answer that first, please.
I'm on the study committee, so I've attended all of the study committee meetings. I am not in favor of the original proposal, and I'm not in favor of repeating the process of how it was handled. One of the things that I think we've really learned through the study committee as we reach out to the neighborhoods and the community is that people are receptive to change, but they want it done in a way that fits the community and isn't going to adversely affect the character of the town and the reason why they moved there in the first place. And the original proposal was much different than where we're landing now. We're actually looking at creating a new overlay that would accommodate senior housing or multifamily housing on the north side of Route 40 to revitalize that area. So I am in favor of change. I'm just not in favor of the original one that was proposed.
Thank you very much. Glenn, would you please respond to that question?
Sure. I was not on the Route 40 committee. I didn't attend any of the meetings. We had enough planning board people at the meetings. If any more planning board people went to it, it would have been a conflict, and so we didn't go to it. Very well thought out on it. The original process that went through was trying to get rushed through, and I wasn't a big fan of that. The Route 40 area definitely needs something. I don't think what they had proposed the first time was that something. You'd have to look into it a lot stronger to try to figure out exactly what's going to work there. There's been talk about a senior housing on the north side and leaving the south side alone, and there's a lot to do there, and it's going to have to get run through this study committee a little bit more, I think, for everybody to get all their stuff together and come to a conclusion.
Thank you, Glenn. Pat, your opportunity to answer that.
Okay, thank you. Well, the reason we have a study committee is so that that committee can come to a conclusion and present it to the rest of the town and to the boards and to town meeting. I did attend a couple of the initial meetings where the public input sessions where some of the neighborhoods, the neighbors did speak about their concerns and their ideas about how to move forward or not. I feel now that we should let the committee finish their work and come forward with the proposal that they think works best for the neighborhood. Whether that will be one that I agree with or not, I'll have to wait and see what they come up with and how they present it. But short of that, we set up a committee for a reason. I have not attended a lot of the individual meetings because, again, we do have a selectman on that committee, and I know other board members do make it a habit of going to those meetings also, and similar to Glenn, didn't want to make a potential conflict.
Okay, let's go to question number 2. This time, Glenn, you'll be answering first, followed by Pat, and then Virginia. Question number 2 is, what specific issue or issues motivated you to run for selectman? Glenn?
Well, I don't think there was any specific issues to speak of. I kind of just wanted to run to try to get a little bit more transparency out there and try to help along with the knowledge that I have as far as running a business and running a company and just try to get things going in the right direction again. It seems as if everything has, over the years, just gone down the same path constantly, and it seems like it's getting stale. So I'd just like to freshen it up a little bit and try to get it going in a more positive direction.
Pat, your opportunity to, what's making you run again for selectman is probably the right question to ask you.
Okay, and that's an interesting question as why I want to run again. And I think part of that question is answered in the introduction that the moderator read about myself. I did grow up in town. I went to school here. I've spent pretty much all my life in the town of Chelmsford. I've seen it transform from a agricultural and farming community into the community that we have now, which is almost totally developed with residences and businesses, particularly small businesses. I'd like to be instrumental in seeing in following that and following up on that, watching the future of Chelmsford, and making sure that we do it in the right way, that we see the community grow, but grow in ways that are going to be beneficial to the residents of the town and not detrimental. So those are my main reasons for continuing to serve on the board.
Virginia, your opportunity.
I also don't have any one specific issue that compelled me to run. I had a long-term interest in public service that had its roots in my defense industry career, and as I got involved in the Route 40 Study Committee, it just became apparent to me that with my background, I had a lot of skills and maybe fresh perspectives that could be beneficial to the town. And what I'm really interested in, I think we all agree we want an economically strong town, and that's what I've heard from a lot of residents, but they want it done in a way that preserves or enhances the reasons that they came here in the first place, similar to what Pat said. And so that's what I'd like to do, is bring a little more inclusiveness to the table, a little more outreach and communication to make sure that we're serving all of the residents and all of the businesses in town. Thank you.
Our third question will be first directed to Pat, followed by Virginia, and then Glenn, and that is as follows. Chelmsford recently hired a business development director to address the issue of high commercial vacancy rates. Since that time, the Board of Selectmen has drastically raised commercial tax rates, and they are now reviewing increased fees for businesses. Do you feel the current board policies are a benefit or detriment to the business director's efforts to lure new businesses to Chelmsford? If elected, what policies would you promote to attract business to these available spaces in Chelmsford? Pat?
Okay, well, thank you for that question. It's a multi-part question. I think it'd be difficult to answer in 1 minute, but I will try.
Well, you know what, Pat? That's a very fair question. I'm going to interrupt you. We'll give them 2 minutes to answer that question for each, because it is multi-part. I am sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, thank you. As far as the business development director, Lisa Maroney, I've told the town manager several times, I think she is one of the best hires that he has made. She has been instrumental in bringing new business to the community and making the businesses that are here now feel more welcome, so, and encouraging them to stay and to grow. So I give both of them, the town manager and the Economic Development Director, a lot of credit for doing that. regarding the tax rate, which recently was split. You may recall that I voted against that at the meeting where that was done last, I believe it was early December. I gave my reasons then for not wanting to split the tax rate. I do understand the pressures that are put on the businesses in town as far as higher fees that they are charged for other services such as water and sewer. And I know we are planning to review the fees. I don't imagine they're going to go up significantly, so I don't really consider that a major disincentive, although I know that another fee that was implemented is the stormwater fee that went to a lot of businesses, and that can be very difficult, I know, for them to take upon at this time, having set all their budgets for what they planned on having to spend is for town services in this year, and then to have them increase so dramatically definitely was, I know, a surprise. I mean, as far as policies, we don't have a specific policy regarding any of those issues. As far as the tax rate, depending on how the board makeup is in the next, with the next board coming in, maybe we can mitigate some of the extra expense that the businesses have incurred in the past year. I hope that we can help them with that, because I do know that the businesses are so beneficial to this community, and I would hate to see them leave, and I would like to help them out in some way to make it easier for them to stay in town.
Virginia, your opportunity, and you'll have 2 minutes as well, please.
Thank you. I think that the start that Lisa Maroney has in her first year has been a great one. She's done an awful lot in terms of outreach to try to understand our local businesses, what's going to attract other businesses to come into the town, and also trying to initiate some of those relationships. In terms of the tax rate, I think that decision was made, and we need to let it ride for a year or two and see what it does. I think it's unrealistic to just flip it back. I don't fully understand why the 27% was chosen, and I'd want to understand that more, but I think you're going to see fluctuations still between residential and business tax burdens. The fees, I know the stormwater fee was a real surprise to some, as Pat said. I don't honestly know what I would have done differently, because I don't have familiarity with it enough. But if buildings have already been built where they had to deal with their own stormwater fees, maybe we could have taken a look at that and see if they really should be bearing the burden for all of the businesses. In terms of policy and retaining or attracting new businesses to Route 29, I don't know that I can answer that from a policy perspective right now, but what I would say is I think that a couple things need to happen. The Board of Selectmen and the town manager are doing a nice job at presenting a leadership front to businesses that might be interested in coming into town, and I think that we need to provide a strong leadership front to that. As much work as Lisa does, at the end of the day, those decisions and relationships need to be established at higher levels, and they need to see that from the leadership of the town. The second thing I would say in terms of businesses in town or businesses coming is I think from an experiential standpoint, we need to look at what are we creating and how do they view their experience doing business with Chelmsford, and how do we make that a positive one and one that they want to have. Thank you.
And Glenn, your opportunity.
Right. I agree that I think Lisa has done a great job so far as to what she's been doing. My idea on that tax rate thing was, I think that the 27% was a lot to hit the businesses with right off the bat. It should have been done over 3 years. It probably wouldn't have hurt as much. I think that I lost my words here.
Well, you went last. The questions are, do you feel the current board policies are a benefit or detriment to the director's efforts to lure new businesses, and what policies do you think the town should promote?
Okay, so what the town should promote at this point, what I think, you should go to the developers and maybe cut some of the fees and some of the taxes to get them to come in to start doing it. There's way too many fees and taxes. Development isn't like it used to be. There's not as much profit in it as there used to be because there's so much red tape to go through and time and lawyers and engineers. I think if you cut that stuff down, you're going to attract people to want to come to try to work into the areas that we want them in.
Thank you. And let's be sure we don't cut the lawyers' participation in that down too much. We play a role in that, hopefully a good one. Question number 4, and Virginia, you'll get the first chance at this one. Many residents and business owners assert that the town does not appear to do a very good job at controlling expenses. Apart from the school budget, if budget cuts had to be implemented to save money, what line items in the town's operating budget, other than the schools, would you first reduce?
I think that's a really tough question. Do not have a intimate knowledge of every single budget line. I think that we got to also work the flip side, which is the revenue generation. But things that I would look at in expenses are head count. Do we need all the heads that we have, or the new heads that we're proposing? I would look at things like where is there fat? But the problem that I see is in everyone that I've spoken to, I don't think there's a lot of fat to be had. And I think that, our services are running level services without budgets to accommodate the increase in demand. And it's a very challenging problem right now. And I think we might be better served to work the revenue side.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Glenn, your comments to that?
Yeah, right. It's difficult to throw a fast answer at a question like that. You'd have to get into the books and look into it to see exactly what needs to get cut, where you can cut without hurting stuff like public safety and in the school systems and all that. There got to be some fat that needs to be trimmed that isn't really going to affect anything. And I think that'd be the area that I'd try to push towards getting that done at.
Okay. Pat?
Okay, as far as where cuts would be made, I think that would be very difficult to identify anything like that. Paul Cohen, the town manager, has done a good job in crafting balanced budgets that are fair to all the departments, trying to meet the needs of the departments and the residents as a whole. You may recall that in 2008 we had a potential override on the ballot. It failed. Because of that, there was a pretty significant cut as far as head count across the town. We just now are getting back to where the head count had been before that point. So I think it would be difficult to identify headcounts that could be reduced at this time. You want to maintain public safety, you want to maintain DPW, you want to maintain the community and human services that we have. I agree with Virginia that we need to look at other sources of revenue, particularly additional state aid.
Our next question, it will be first directed to Glenn, followed by Pat, and then Virginia. The Board of Selectmen has created from time to time committees to study specific issues. For example, tax classification, grinder pumps, or having an in-house fire department ambulance rather than a private company, for examples. Do you believe that the Board of Selectmen has properly utilized the data and/or the recommendations of those committees? Please explain your position. Glenn?
Well, I think these committees always get brought in just to quiet people down and keep people happy. When they go out to the committees, a lot of times the committees will come back and nothing will get done. I shouldn't say nothing will get done. A lot of times things don't get done the way the committee thinks that they should be done. My thought on trying to remedy that, and I don't know if it would take a charter change or something like that, is to have the committee come back in and be able to sit in on the actual vote that they will put the committee against. And that would kind of keep things going in the right direction and try to get the ultimate goal of what they were thinking of doing, getting that done the way it should have been done.
Okay. Pat?
Well, I think it's been critical to have most of these committees set up that have been over the past several years. All the ones that you mentioned, the grinder pump, the ambulance, and the split tax rate. I think the Board of Selectmen did a good job in staffing those committees, allowed them to take their time and do an adequate and very professional job to generate a report that made sense and and that we were able to follow through on. I think it would be unrealistic to expect the board to just in lockstep agree with all of the conclusions that they come to and follow all of those without some additional study. But I think it's also important to have a group that's focused just on that topic. I think if the Board of Selectmen tried to do it themselves, that would really create so much additional work for them, and then it would look like to the rest of the residents that it were just 5 people that were making all the decisions for the town, where I think it's a lot easier if it does come from a lot of the other residents that have some expertise in those areas.
Thank you. Virginia?
I think when it comes to things like committee data and committee recommendations, what you call proper use of that is really in the eye of the beholder. From what I've seen, I think that the board has carefully weighed the inputs that they've gotten from various committees, and I think that the decisions that they've made, while we might not all agree with them, or we may be in agreement with them, were made in good faith and were made with what each individual member felt was right for the community. So I don't have an issue with how they've used data from committees.
Thank you very much. Question number 6, and Pat, you'll be the first to answer this, followed by Virginia and then Glenn. Candidates on the national, state, and local level make promises on certain issues when campaigning, but when it comes time to vote, don't follow through on those promises. On the local level, 2 former selectmen candidates publicly stated that they did not support a split tax rate, and yet both of them became 2 of the 3 votes that did exactly that this past December. To our candidates, what do you think about public officials who break campaign commitments on specific topics? Are you going to do the same? Pat?
Well, I would hope that I don't do the same, and it's interesting that you bring that up. I had a campaign event a week and a half or so ago, and I gave a short speech, and at the end of it, one of the members that's here, and one of the audience members that's in this room came up to me afterwards and said, "That was a nice speech. You didn't make any promises, so you're not going to break any promises." So that was very, that was who said that. So I try not to firmly make any promises before an election, before I'm able to review all of the data that might have any impact on making a decision. So I would definitely hope that I don't break any promises, but I'm not going to, judge anybody that changes their mind at some point in the future. They might come up with some other criteria or some other information that forces them to, in good conscience, to make that change.
All right, thank you, Pat. Virginia?
So I guess I'm also not going to make disparaging remarks or judge somebody if their position changed. I don't know that it's breaking a promise or that they became informed in a different way and that swayed them a different way. I know that there are town meeting reps on that very issue that have changed over the years, and I don't hold them in any disregard for that. In terms of myself making promises, I'm in the same boat as Pat. I'm not going to make a commitment or a promise until I know that, until I'm informed. And things like like I said, things like the tax rate, I feel that we need to be better informed on it as it rides for another year or two and see what happens with it. So,
Okay. Glenn?
All right, but promises are something that I typically try to keep. When you're making a campaign promise, a lot of times you'll get into something, and once you get into the nuts and bolts of it, you're going to find out that what you thought you could do by promising it, a lot of times you can't do. I think the easiest thing to do would be just pick and choose the campaign promises that you know you could keep and not get yourself in the predicament.
Okay. Question number 7, which will be answered first by Virginia, then Glenn, and then Pat. What votes taken by the Board of Selectmen in the last 3 years do you think were wrong or had the wrong outcome? And why do you think those decisions were wrong or incorrectly decided? Virginia?
the thing that jumps out to me, and I wouldn't call it wrong, I would say that I would do it differently, have to do with pushing things forward fast. I think, and in hindsight, it looks like it was too fast. So things like Route 40, we're at a much different place than we were last summer when we thought we were all buttoned up and ready to go based on what that recommendation was. Things like the Sergeants Union contract, when that hit the town meeting floor, nobody had any data or any time to review anything. So I think one of the things that I would do differently is make sure that we've really done our homework, we have our ducks in line, and we're ready to go before we start pushing things to the town meeting floor.
Okay, Glenn?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I didn't like, the split tax, the 27% tax rate that was given out to the business community. As I said before, I think that should have been scheduled over 3 or 4 years so it wasn't such a burden to the business community. The one thing I didn't like. The other thing I didn't like was giving the town manager a 14% raise. 14% is a lot of money to give somebody a raise. I don't think that was such a wise move to make.
Very well. Pat?
Yeah, I guess I'll mention two things. One being one of the ones that Glenn just mentioned, the split tax rate. I think even if it were going to be split, I wish it had not been as much as it was. And again, as you recall, I did vote against that. And another one is the regional dispatch. That's come before the board a couple of times in the past 5 years. I think if it were really studied more carefully, even by the people who it would affect the most, they would realize that it would be more beneficial to them than it would be detrimental to them. I think it can be a cost-saving measure. I think it would improve technology. I think it would improve the mutual aid, basically, that we get from other communities. So I saw that as definitely a way to improve the community and public response. So that's one vote that I wish had gone the other way.
Very well. Let's go to questions among and between the candidates for a moment. In the first chance, we're going to ask Virginia to ask Glenn a question.
So Glenn, in Margaret Smith's February 21st article in the Chelmsford Independent, she credits you with stating that you want to move up the ladder from the planning board to make the town better and see things work more proactively. Can you give an example in your career or in your volunteer activities where you've been a proactive advocate?
Well, the work that we did on the planning board to implement the overlay districts, both of those were a proactive approach to trying to get the business community to move a little bit more on 129 and other parts of the town.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. Glenn, you have an opportunity to ask a question of Pat.
All right, one question for Pat. Going back on the raise for the town manager, what did he do over and above his regular job duty that justified a 14% raise?
Well, I think there were a lot of aspects that went into that raise for the town manager. It wasn't just one or two things, and it wasn't just 1 or 2 years. He had been getting the same increases that the other non-union personnel had been getting for, really, since he started here over 12 years ago. And effectively, that was not benefiting him. It was hurting the amount that he was getting, because because most of the other employees also get a step increase in addition to the percentage increase. So basically, he was falling further and further behind. So that's number one. I feel like he did deserve a bump because of that. And also, he does do a lot that people don't see. He's recruited to join different organizations, the Middlesex 3 Coalition. Neshoba Tech has asked him to be on their OPEB study committee. He's been recruited by several state semi-public organizations to be on their boards. I think he's a very well-respected person, both as a town manager and an administrator and a creative thinker. So I think for all those reasons, that increase was justified.
Okay, Pat, you get a chance to ask Virginia a question.
Okay. Virginia, you've been on the Route 40 Study Committee, but that's really been the only, volunteer public committee that you've been on. But what have you learned from being on that committee that you think would help you being a member of the Board of Selectmen?
I've learned a lot about, besides studying all of the town's bylaws and zoning, I've really learned a lot about how to bring a community together, and how to reach out and get inputs and try to get alignment around ideas. Like I said, we've landed in a completely different place than the proposal was last summer, and I think we've got something in place now that the community can stand behind. It's also given me some insight into how the different boards and committees work, as I had to understand the process of how this would be carried forward, and the process that it would all go to town meeting with. So I think it's given me some decent exposure.
Okay, on the next round of questions, Virginia, you need to ask a question of Pat.
Sure. Pat, in Margaret Smith's February 21st article in the Chelmsford Independent, there's commentary about your careful consideration in deciding to run and your commitment to running. She begins this commentary with a statement that you said, there does come a point where you feel you are not as effective. Could you please clarify what you meant by that and how personal effectiveness can be improved?
Well, I think when she and I talked, when Margaret Smith and I talked during that time, I had just decided that I was definitely going to be running again for a seat on the Board of Selectmen. But it was a difficult decision because I think as you sit on the board, sometimes you can get to the point where you do things because that's the way you've always done them, not necessarily because that's the best way that they should be done. And sometimes you need to step back or listen to other people outside of your own atmosphere, your own environment, to get some perspective on how things can be done more effectively and better. As far as personal effectiveness, I think that's one of those things that when it happens, you know it, and I hope I haven't gotten to the ineffective part yet. I hope I still have a few more years before that happens.
Okay. Glenn, your opportunity to ask a question of Virginia.
All right, Virginia. What would you like to see happen in the Route 40 corridor?
I would like to see a change that enhances the area, is not detrimental to the quality of life of some of the existing residents and the abutters, and is not detrimental to some of our existing businesses nearby in that area. I think we have an opportunity to help grow the economic strength of Chelmsford through some of the recommendations that that committee is coming up with, specifically to look at 55-plus or age-in-place communities or some form of multifamily housing that would help the revenue in the town and would fit very well in that area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. The next and last question will be from Pat to Glenn.
Okay, thank you. So Glenn, you've been on the planning board, as has been mentioned, for several years now. Aside from the obvious as far as what actual parts of the town that you rule the most on, how do you think it would be different serving on the Board of Selectmen, and how do you think it would be the same?
I think it'd be different because you're working with more budgetary stuff in comparison to zoning issues. As far as being the same, I think the workings of it and the voting and all that stuff would probably be pretty close to the same in being able to work together with other members to try to come to a conclusion on something that needs to get done. That would be probably the same as the planning would.
Okay. One of the questions that came up from the audience this evening was, there's some discussion about when the census is being retaken, that the town will undergo a redistricting of state representation. Currently, Chelmsford has 4 separate state representatives because we've been divided up. So we'll go in the order of asking Pat to answer this question first, followed by Virginia, and then Glenn. The question will be, do you advocate that Chelmsford should push strongly for a single state representative to be representative of Chelmsford alone as a separate seat? Do you agree that we should continue using the 4 existing state rep program or module that we've been using? Or would it be better to do a hybrid, which is transfer some of the various districts and get the reduced to 2 state reps representing Chelmsford? So I'm going to ask that, Pat, for you to answer that. What module would you like to follow out of those 3 scenarios, and what order?
Well, I think ideally we would have at least one resident from the town of Chelmsford that is in the House of Representatives, that acts as a representative from the town of Chelmsford. Obviously, the best way to do that would be if the town of Chelmsford were consolidated into just one district. Unfortunately, we don't have quite enough population for that. We would have to be combined with, precincts from a different community or another smaller community, such as maybe Tingsboro or Carlisle. Second best would be, I think, if we could have just 2 representatives. There's you may recall that almost 10 years ago, we did create a committee that did study that to see what the options might be on how the precincts could be consolidated with the districts that we have now, shifting around some precincts. Unfortunately, we don't get to make that decision. It is made at the state level, but ideally, we would have one with all of Chelmsford. The second best would be just Chelmsford divided into 2.
Okay, Virginia?
I think the best scenario would be to have one, and I also agree that if we can't do that, having 2 would be better than what we have now. I think Mr. Ragazio had some very insightful comments at the last Board of Selectmen meeting, and there is some experience base there that we should draw from to look at how we navigate this if the census turns out that we are able to do some redistricting. In the meantime, I think we need to work on growing stronger relationships with the reps that we do have, and I've reached out to 3 of the 4 so far during my candidacy to try to start doing that. Thank you.
Okay, Glenn?
Well, I'd be in favor of a single rep myself. I think it'd be easier to work with one person and trying to get 2 or 3 or 4 people to try to work all together. I think it'd be a lot easier getting one person to help the town along than multiple people.
Okay. Some follow-up questions that have been provided to us as a result of your answers this evening. And these are in no particular order, so I'm just go as we have them here. Virginia, a question to you. You've used the term with respect to tax classification of, quote, letting it play out. Would we ask you to put a little bit more flesh on the bones to that response, if you don't mind?
Sure. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of residents who are feeling pain, and we had a populist vote, and now there's a lot of businesses who are feeling pain that may not be able to absorb that as easily into their planning as a Walmart or a Staples. I think we need to look at the data, and the other phenomena that you can see is as the business's tax base goes up, it's quite possible their assessed values could go down. So you could start to see a fluctuation where the residents are now assuming more tax burden than initially thought with that 27% split. And I think, to Glenn's point, there are, in the classification study, towns that initially start with, when they initiate a tax classification, most of them were at 10 to 15% or in the single digits. So we need to understand the 27% as well. But we need to see what's happening there and how that's affecting the burden of the tax between the residents and the businesses, and also how it's affecting the business's ability to continue giving back to the community.
Okay. Glenn, you, in your responses, particularly as to Route 40, you said that you're more concerned that what is ultimately developed there not be more detrimental. What do you mean? What do you think was more detrimental to what was being proposed? What parts of it were unacceptable to you, or you thought it would be harmful?
Well, we really never even had a plan put in place as to what the actual thing was going to turn out like. The talk of it was the big shopping center and all the residential stuff on the other side of the road. I think having a huge shopping center in that area will be detrimental to that neighborhood. All the housing on that road, I think that will be detrimental to the people that bought the houses, where you have a hot top plant going in there now. You'd be getting nothing but complaints from everybody all the time. So it would be just a burden on the town having to answer questions constantly.
Okay, thank you for both of you for those follow-ups. Pat, going back to the town manager raise issue, Glenn raised the point that he was given a 14 or 16% raise, yet other town departments were asked, including some, I believe, unions, to only take 2% or 3% raises. So as a member of the Board of Selectmen that had to review and make that offer, a counteroffer, how do you think that the town manager can, in good faith, be asking for that type of significant raise, but yet be bargaining with collective bargaining units and other individuals working for the town at much, much lower percentages? How do you reconcile that?
Well, as I said, the unions, in addition to the percent increases that they get, almost to a person, get step increases in addition to those, as those increases go up. So if say a clerk in the assessor's office gets a 2% raise, plus they get a step from a level 8, step 4 to a level 8, step 5, that's an additional 1.5% to 2% increase. So effectively, they're getting maybe a 3% raise per year, even though the contract said they're getting a 2% raise. I know it's kind of difficult to follow the logic on that sometimes, and so the town manager, when up until this time, this last review of his salary, was taking just the 2% and not getting that additional bump that the other employees were getting from their step increases. So I felt like it was an opportunity to level that out for him. Again, I know it's you'd have to look at all the numbers from the 12 or 13 years that he's been here to see exactly what the impact has been. And I know there for a while it was a point of pride for him to take just that amount that he was that the other contracts were taking.
Thank you.
Again, I think he did deserve it because of the respect that he gets in the community and from others in this area.
Okay, we are going to go to our next question. This one, Glenn, you'll be answering first, Pat will be second, Virginia will be third. There's discussion about the need to construct a more modern or new high school to educate our children, and that the current facility is technologically outdated and inefficient with current teaching methods. In the next 3 years, would you support a tax override to build a new school? Please explain your position.
Yeah, well, let's face it, the high school's 40 years old now. We don't think it because time goes by so fast. In probably the past 10 or so years, the codes have changed so much. That school is probably so outdated code-wise, you'd have to look at it and see what it's going to cost, A, to bring it up to code, and B, it might be cheaper to build a new school. The infrastructure is there for the way, I don't know what they need for teaching-wise, but as far as on a building perspective, I think it would, with the way that the codes are, I think it'd be probably a better issue to build a new school. Would I be in favor of an override? I don't think I'd be in favor of it, but if it had to happen, it would have to happen.
Okay. Talk about not making promises, right?
There you go.
So let's go now to Pat.
Well, I think it should be clear that, the school department has proposed a new high school twice now to the MSBA, the Mass School Building Association, and they probably will do it again this year. But even if that were to be agreed to by the MSBA, it would not be to tear down the existing high school and build a new one. The new high school, what I call a new high school is the one that we use as a high school right now. It is 40 years old, but 40 years old is not that old as far as I'm concerned, as far as for a high school, for any kind of school, for any kind of public building. And I think our facilities department does an excellent job in maintaining all our buildings in town. So would I support building a new building for a high school? I possibly would. I think I would have to know more about it, and I think it's going to be a long process to get it through the MSBA. And then as far as an override, I'm going to go with Glenn's answer. I'd have to see what it was going to cost and what we were going to get for that.
Virginia?
So fundamentally, I agree that we need to make sure that our facilities are safe and current to give the best education to our kids. In terms of an override, again, I agree with the other candidates. I got to see the data and what does that override really look like. And the other thing I think we need to look at is, does it have to be an override, depending on how much aid you get from the state? So, are there other capital projects rolling off the books? And are there things that we could do within the current budget constraints to fund whatever those improvements or replacements need to be? And without having any of that data in front of me, I don't know.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've now gotten to that point of our evening where, for the candidates, it's the conclusion. And we're going to ask them to make a closing statement. I'm going to ask Glenn if he would go first, followed by Pat, followed by Virginia. So Glenn, 1 minute for a closing statement.
Firstly, I'd like to thank the Chelmsford Business Association for hosting this event. I'm proud of what myself and my fellow colleagues of the planning board have accomplished over the years by allowing for more commercial business to take place here in Chelmsford. More importantly, we have positioned Chelmsford in a better place for our future generations. We're a community of doers who can continuously show positively optimism and enthusiasm. Chelmsford is a unique community that offers unlimited opportunities for those of us that live and do business here. The investments we allow for now in our planning and infrastructure for the future are critical to Chelmsford's survival as a business and residential community. The decisions we make will provide the framework to develop a blueprint for how you and I want the town to look in future years. I want us as a community to be more involved in the conversations taking place here in Chelmsford. The more driven we are as a community, the more we will grow as a town in the years to come. By being more proactive about economic development and opportunities taking place in Chelmsford, we will be able to use that growth to reduce the residential tax burden. Thank you.
You're welcome. Pat?
Thank you. I want to thank the Chelmsford Business Association for hosting this forum tonight and for the other two candidates to make this an interesting race and campaign. I look forward to the next 3 weeks almost. There is, we joked a little bit earlier about making promises. Well, there is one promise that I will make, and that's that for every issue that comes before the Board of Selectmen, I'll carefully consider all the aspects of it and evaluate how it will impact the entire town, all the residents, all the businesses, everybody from North Chelmsford to South Chelmsford, the Westlands, the young, the old, the people that have kids in schools, and the seniors that don't. So that is one commitment I'll make, and I'm sure that I can keep that promise to the voters of Chelmsford. So I'm going to work the hardest as I possibly can to make Chelmsford a better place to live, work, and play. So with that, I respectfully ask for one of your 2 votes on Election Day, April 2nd. Thank you.
And Virginia, your closing statement?
Thank you to the CBA, everyone here, and the viewers at home for the opportunity to participate this evening. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, it would be my privilege to grow and strengthen our leadership for the people across our entire community. I believe that this leadership for the people includes 5 essential elements: listening, where we encourage people to be heard and have a voice while valuing diversity in thought; proactiveness, where we commit to reach out and research how issues and policies impact the community; advocacy, where we consider different viewpoints with deliberate intentions on bettering the quality of lives for our residents of all generations; transparency, where we are not only open and honest, but we're ensuring that the top-level information is brought forward and that lower-level implications are understood; and fiscal responsibility, where we carefully watch expenses, actively participate in revenue growth efforts, and ensure the best use of our taxpayer monies. Thank you for your consideration, and I respectfully ask for one of your 2 votes for the open seats on Tuesday, April 2nd.
First, thank you to the candidates. And before we conclude the program this evening, we are asking everybody here and at home to make sure that they go to the polls and vote on Tuesday, April 2nd. But let's now give a good round of applause for our candidates. And on behalf of the Chelmsford Business Association, it's been our pleasure to have you here and welcome you. We wish you the best of luck in your campaigns, and we look forward to hearing and learning more about each of your positions on different issues.
Thank you.
To everyone else, thank you for coming in this evening or watching at home. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.